Hello, welcome to Social Sciences and Law. So this is coming to you from Worthing College, and everything we say is relevant to both Worthing College and Haywards Heath College. So the subjects we're going to talk about tonight are law, sociology, psychology, criminology. There's also the applied law and the applied psychology. I can see there's, numbers are going up there. We've got 70 odd people. So we're just going to chat for a moment until we get going properly, give people a chance to attend. We're going to give you a taste of the subjects. These are subjects that some of you won't have come across before. Most of you can't do these subjects at school. So they'll be new to you. I'm going to talk you through some highlights of the subjects, the kind of things that you would study, some of the skills involved to do well in the subjects. And there's an opportunity for you to ask any questions. So there's a Q&A, and if you use the Q&A for any questions, we'll answer those at the end. It may be that some of the questions will be answered as we're going through the presentation. Otherwise, we'll be able to answer those as we go through. If you have any technical problems, could you put those into the chat? Somebody will be monitoring those and they'll help you if you're unable to access the presentation, or if it's gone very quiet for you. So once again, for people who are just joining us, we've got 115 people out there now. This is Social Sciences and Law. So I'm going to be talking about law, and my colleague Kate Hall, I think she's out there. She's waving. She's going to talk about psychology. So that's the A-level and the applied psychology. We've got Laura Harbrow from Haywards Heath. She's going to be talking about criminology and sociology, as is Philippa Lloyd, who's the subject leader for sociology and criminology here at Worthing. So we are recording this presentation, and you'll be able to find it on the website shortly afterwards. I think the recording's going on tomorrow, and any Q&As will be going on later in the week. So you find all of that through our website. If there's anything you missed you'd like to go back to, it'll be there. So just for anybody who's coming on now, there'll be the Q&A. So if you have any questions, do stick them in the Q&A. We'll get round to answering them. We'll leave those until the end, because it may be that some of it's things that we're going to cover through the presentation. I think that's probably about time to get going. So once again, my name's Tim Westcott. I'm the Deputy Head of Learning here at Worthing, and I teach law and the applied law subjects. My colleague Kate teaches psychology, that's the A-level and the applied subjects, the applied psychology. Philippa teaches sociology and criminology here at Worthing, and Laura teaches sociology and criminology at Haywards Heath. Can we have the next slide, please? So those are the subjects we're going to cover. Social science is a very diverse group of subjects, and they all have people at their heart. So why people act the way they do, what happens when things don't necessarily go smoothly, how society works from various points of view, from a sociological point of view, from a law point of view. Could we have the next slide, please? So one of the first decisions that you'll have to make is whether you're going for an A-level type course or an applied course. And you've probably heard of BTECs. When we talk about applied courses, we're usually talking about BTEC, although the criminology is an applied course and it's a different exam board, but it's a WJEC, a similar kind of thing. And they are very different kinds of courses. So for example, you could do law A-level or the applied law, and you could do psychology A-level or the applied psychology. The A-level courses are traditional A-levels. They're academic type subjects. They're examined at the end. So one of the skills is to have got a good memory so that you can retain all that information over the 2 years. Obviously, there's lots of help to be assessed throughout to build up all those skills and that knowledge, but all the assessment is at the end of 2 years. So there's no exams at the end of the first year that count towards the actual A-level itself. The applieds are a bit different. So the applieds have a different style of exams. They're generally aimed at people thinking of working in that field. So the applied law, you would do things like write letters to clients. It's very much focused on a more practical approach to the subjects. So you have exams, external assessments, but you would do them throughout the year. So not all at the end of 2 years. You would generally do one in the January of each year. and you'd have the opportunity to redo it in the summer if you needed to retake it, try to improve your grade, and half the marks come from coursework. Now, Philippa's going to tell you how that's a bit different in criminology later on, but essentially that's the model. So half in coursework, half in assessments, more vocational type assessments, whereas the A-levels are much more academic. So very often this content of the course is quite similar. So one of the big questions is how do you thrive? Are you somebody who thrives on exams, or are you somebody who thrives on meeting lots of deadlines and being very good at building up that store of knowledge and those grades as you're going along? They're all worth the same. So you can get to university with an A-level, and you can get to university with applied courses. They've got the same currency. So you shouldn't be worried about which is the most valuable. It's very much about how you like to study. Could we have the next slide, please?
Hi, so my name's Kate. I'm a psychology teacher at Worthing, and I was just going to show you a couple of quotes that we got from students at college to just give you an idea of how popular the subjects are at college, at both Haywards Heath and Worthing. So I'll just give you a moment to read what they've said. We do get quite a lot of student voice opportunities at college to hear what students think of our courses, and they all are very positive about the social sciences. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so that's back to me and the law. What I should say, of course, is that all our courses are worth one single A-level. So some subjects, for example, health and social care, has applied that are worth 3 A-levels. That's all you would do. Whereas all the courses we're talking about today are worth one single A-level. Now, in terms of law, both courses cover criminal law, the law of tort, which is about things like negligence, being able to sue an individual. What I'm teaching at the moment is the law of non-fatal offences. So that comes up in both the A-level and the applied course. So we're looking at different kinds of assault, so assault and battery, ABH, GBH, that's actual bodily harm, and grievous bodily harm. And yesterday I was teaching a lesson on actual bodily harm. So that's where someone has more than trivial injuries, but not really serious injuries. And that's something the law's got to assess. How do we categorize certain kinds of offence? And a really interesting case there concerns a man who attacked his girlfriend. He sat on her and he cut off her ponytail. And the question for the courts was that bodily harm, cutting off someone's ponytail? And my lights have gone off. Was that bodily harm? And I'm sure you're thinking about that for a moment. I'll give you a moment to talk about whoever you're with. Do you think that the courts decided that cutting off someone's ponytail was just trivial harm, was that a battery? Or was it actual harm, or was it serious harm? But that count as grievous bodily harm? The answer is it was actual bodily harm. The court said that that was a bit sexist. They did say to a woman, her hair is a very important part of her body, and harming that is the same as harming her. So he was found guilty of actual bodily harm. In contract law, we look at what can go wrong with contracts, and one of the things that goes wrong is frustration, something that happens that stops a contract being performed. So very topical at the moment, all sorts of contracts are going to be frustrated with the COVID dilemma. So it's a very interesting case there called Sakiroglu, one of the best case names I think going, Sakiroglu and Nobody Thal. And in Sakiroglu, there was a contract to ship nuts from the east coast of Africa up to Europe. Now they would have gone through the Suez Canal, but the Suez Canal was closed. And so they were faced with a journey that was 4 times as long. And the question is, did that frustrate the contract? Did that mean that the contract was something different to what they'd anticipated? And the answer was no, that they hadn't said how they were going to ship the nuts, which route they were going to take, just that they had to do it. So what looked like a profitable contract suddenly made them a huge loss when they couldn't take the anticipated route. So the law deals with dilemmas. The law deals with when things go wrong and how should they deal with it. And one of the really good things about law is there often isn't a single right answer. So it's up to one of the skills of lawyers is to argue their client's case as effectively as possible. And that's what you do in lessons as well. So there's quite a lot of debating, sometimes arguing, about how the law should apply to a number of scenarios. We work closely with a number of universities. So Chichester University did a presentation just 2 weeks, the week before half term, to our second year students. So they have a taste of what it's like to study at university level, and also some advice on applying to universities and how to write their personal statements. And as it says at the bottom there, we're all senior examiners, so we're very well placed to give students a really close guidance on exactly what's required to be successful in our subjects. Next slide, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Philippa Lloyd, subject lead for Sociology and Criminology, and I'll just talk briefly about sociology. So obviously Haywards Heath and Worthing colleges, we are delivering the course in the same way. So whether you start at Haywards Heath or whether you start here at Worthing, it doesn't matter, you'll be following the same curriculum. So when you start studying sociology, we start with education. So we look at sociology through different topics. And so we will start with education because you will come straight from school and doing your GCSEs, well, hopefully, and then we will be looking at, well, why is it that different people do well or badly in different subjects? Because in sociology, we're looking at how different social groups might experience the world. So say in education, why is it that girls always outperform boys, or people from working class backgrounds don't do as well as those from richer backgrounds? So for sociology, we're kind of thinking about things like that. So we're looking at what happens in the classroom, how are teachers affecting your ability to succeed? Do they label you? And all these sorts of things that make you question your social world around you. We also look at different theories and how they might explain education. You know, what's the role of education? Is it to keep you kids off the street, or is it there to prepare and help the economy? After you've done education, we then look at research methods, which is how sociologists go about studying it. So when you look at education, you look at different sociological studies. And so in research methods, we look at how they would have carried out those studies. So once you've done that, you will then look at families. So again, all the different types of families that we live in. So in sociology, we look at things that you're familiar with, but maybe in an unfamiliar way. It will make you see the world in a different way. So we look at families and the different diversity in families, and we look at how maybe different social groups might experience family in different ways. You know, what's it like for a woman in a family? Do they do all the housework and look after all the kids? Is marriage better for men than women? We're looking at social categories and our experiences. These theories that I mentioned before will come through each of the topics we look at. So we'll have like functionalist theory, Marxist theory, feminist theory, the new right. All these theories have a view on what family's like, what education's like, and so on. So in the first year, you look at families, education, and methods. And in the second year, we look at crime and deviance theories and beliefs. So crime and deviance, one of our probably most popular modules, you know, why do people commit crime? And looking at a range of different theories to do that. You know, do people commit crime because they're forced into it because of capitalism? You know, that's what Marxists would say. Or are they doing it as an active choice, you know, which other theorists might think. So we look at crime and deviance, and we look at other theories, again, not a lot of theory in sociology, and then we look at beliefs. So not just like religious beliefs, but, you know, why people believe what they do, some of those weird and wonderful things. What do beliefs offer people? Why have we got extremists? You know, why have we got fundamentalists? You know, look at what's happened today. We've had a terrorist attack, haven't we, in Italy, I think it is. And, you know, is it because of people's beliefs pushing people forward? So it's a really interesting way of looking at the world. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of sociology. So we're looking at things that are familiar, but in a sociological way through theories and through studies. And this is a traditional academic A-level where you'll learn this course over 2 years, and then you'll have 3 exams at the end. So hopefully that gives you an interest into and an insight into what we do. So I'll pass over to Laura, who's going to talk about criminology. So criminology is done at Worthing and Haywards Heath, and Laura's going to talk about that now.
Hi everyone, as Philippa said, I'm the criminology teacher at Haywards Heath, but everything that we do at Haywards Heath is also parallel and mirrored to how Worthing teach it as well. So we go through everything at the same time. So if I just introduce and kind of talk about how criminology is assessed, because it's slightly different to an A-level, And then I'll get into what the subject content is that we'll do over the next 2 years. And so criminology kind of sits, I would say, about halfway between a BTEC and an A-level. It's a widget course. So it's made up of internal assessments that kind of work like coursework, and they're also made up of exams. So each year, every year in the December, you'll do an internal controlled assessment. So that's when you sit and we watch you probably for about 2 days, complete all the work that you've done up until then in a kind of exam base, but again, it's kind of similar to coursework. And then up till Christmas to May, it will follow kind of an A-level structure where you learn the content in class and you sit an external exam with widget in May. And this follows the same process in both years. So criminology is just the study of crime. So we look at crime in our society, and over the 2 years, we do this in lots of different aspects and lots of different ways. In Unit 1, so with my students at the moment, what we're doing is we're looking at changing awareness to crime. So first of all, we look at lots of different types of crime. So we look at crime like white collar crime, state crime, hate crime, and we analyse all of these and we look at who are the offenders of these crimes, who are the victims. Is this something that we see a lot in the media, or is it something that's maybe hidden? Why is it hidden? Is it because of maybe the upper classes have more control over our media? And we'll also look at some case studies and some stuff that you probably would have seen in the media yourself. For example, we look at Bernard Madoff, when we look at white collar crime, and we investigate all of those. And then also in Unit 1, what most of the students enjoy is we do campaigns for change. So we look at campaigns for change in our society. For example, we look at family-led campaigns like Sarah's Law, which obviously we'll go into in more detail, but and then you also decide what you're passionate about and if you had the chance, what would you change in society? Would you want a change in funding? Would you want a change in awareness for something? Would you want a change in law? A lot of my students are considering designing their campaign around homelessness, because at the moment it's still illegal in the UK. So a lot of them are thinking of surrounding their campaigns for change around kind of this idea of vagrancy. And this is all something that goes into their controlled assessment in December. After December, after Christmas, we move on to Unit 2. And this is all about thinking, why do people commit crime? Was it about us that makes people commit crime? Is it the structure of society? And this is what feeds into quite well. If you do sociology, it complements it quite well, and psychology as well, because you look at the same theories, but you apply it very differently. So we'll look at biological theories. Is it, your DNA makeup that makes people commit crime? Or we'll look at, as I said, structural theories and sociologist theories. And in this kind of term, we look at different kind of big names. Like we'll look at Freud, if any of you have heard of them, or we'll look at like Karl Marx with Marxism, and we'll assess all of this and kind of see why someone commits crime. And again, January to May, that follows more of an A-level structure, and that's what you'll sit your exam on. When you come back, Year 2, we move on to Unit 3, and this is the crime scene to courtroom. And this is the one that most people find the most interesting. So we look at when a crime happens and we look at the crime scene and everything about it. We'll look at the evidence, we'll look at fingerprints. What is it about fingerprints? Can we lift them ourselves? And we'll have a go at doing that. And we'll look at the whole process from prosecution. We'll look at the court and trial process. And we'll go through all of this, and it's really interesting. And it leads us on quite nicely as well to Unit 4. So that's our last topic in the second year. And we look at the criminal justice system in England and Wales. And we look at our prison reform system, which I know lots of people, when they choose to do criminology, are very, very interested in. So we look at our kind of forms of social control in our society, and we kind of evaluate, are these effective? Are people being reformed? Are they affected in people being deterred? And we also have a chance to look at prisons again in the Bridge the Gap from Year 1 to Year 2, where you'll do your own prisons project as well. So it is something that's kind of consistent throughout the course, because we know that's been highlighted to us as something that students find very interesting. But overall, over the 2 years, we learn every aspect, or quite a lot of aspects, about crime. And overall, it's something that the students find really interesting. And as I said, it follows a Bridget course as well, which is something we can go more into. But yeah, I'll pass over to Kate now, who will tell you about psychology. So next slide, please.
Okay, so psychology would be described by most people as the science of mind and behaviour. So it's quite important to understand that if you do psychology, you are taking on a science course, and it has a lot of the academic rigour of a science course. What we study is people, and we study all sorts of aspects of people. And the thing to remember about all psychology courses, both the applied psychology BTEC and the A-level, is that they're meant to be general introductions to all sorts of aspects of human behaviour and understanding all sorts of aspects of human behaviour. So we look at all sorts of things, like why we forget some things and remember other things. Why is it that when you go from one room to another, you go to get something and then instantly forget what it was that you'd gone in for? And why is it that coming back will help you recall what it was? We might look at, for example, obedience and conformity. Why do people do as they're told? This is particularly interesting when we look at what's happening in lockdown at the moment, and whether people will do what they're told and why that is. And why we conform to other people, or why sometimes we don't want to conform and we want to be very different, stand out. How do we bring about change in society? How is it that we're able to change people's minds? Then we consider things like the development of attachments between babies and their parents. How does that attachment develop? Why does it develop? What's it for? What happens if you don't form that attachment? We consider the effects of daycare. We then go on and consider things like mental illness, which is what draws an awful lot of people to psychology and is what they're interested in studying. And we will look at explanations of mental illness and also potential treatments and understanding what the causes are and how we can help people. And we also look at the biological explanations of people's behaviour. Running through both courses, whether you do BTEC or A-level, is a really important aspect of research. So because it's a science, it's about investigating people. So you have to be able to find out what makes people tick, and you have to be able to do that in a controlled way. One of the difficulties, though, is that human beings, when you study them, they tend to change their behaviour. So we have to do lots of work on how to investigate human beings. And we also have to collect data on them, and then we have to be able to manipulate that data. So there is a maths component, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. In terms of content, the difference between BTEC and A-level isn't massive. It tends to be about the emphasis that they make. So we'll do very similar theories, for example, about how memory works, but we might use those theories in different ways. What tends to happen is in the applied psychology BTEC, there's much more of a focus on how that information is applied, the clues in the title, how that information is applied to human beings. In particular, on the applied psychology BTEC, for example, you look at trying to understand causes of aggression, you look at trying to understand consumer behaviour, so why people behave the way they do in shops. And also at gender and explaining and understanding gender differences between individuals. So we look at various different bits of what makes people tick. It's not just mental illness, and that's quite important for you to understand. And it also does contain quite a bit of practicals, and you have to be willing to take part in practicals and carry out research investigations, handle the data from that, and do those practicals in class. There are some commonly asked questions that we're all going to go through about our subjects shortly, and I think that will might answer some of the questions about the differences between applied psychology, BTEC and A-level. So I'll do a little bit more on that later. So that gives you hopefully an idea of the sorts of things that we study in psychology. So next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to talk now about what you might do after doing these courses with us. And obviously, university is a very popular choice for all those subject areas. something to mention is that for students going for the very competitive universities that want the A and B grades, we have an Aspire course. So that's not specific to social sciences, that's something that's cross-college, but that helps prepare students for going into very competitive universities, applying at the very highest level. Also for law, a handful of the top universities require a special entrance exam alongside A-levels or BTECs, and that's called the LNAT, the Law National Admissions Test. And we give special tuition for students taking the LNAT, how to write the kind of essay that's required, and how to approach the test. There's an aptitude test. Beyond that, there's a number of non-degree routes into law. So legal apprenticeships are an increasing trend, and law firms are competing for the best young people to come and work for them. So more and more people at 18 with very good A-levels would go straight into a law firm and as an apprentice level. There's certain attractions about not going to university, and that's something that more of our students are actually considering. Kate's going to talk now about progression into psychology routes.
So to do a degree in psychology, you don't need to have done psychology A-level, but it helps, and students who've done a psychology A-level will generally find that the first year of the degree covers some of the same material that they've done. In terms of careers, if you want to do a specialist career in psychology, you'll need to do further work after your degree. So you'd start with a psychology degree, and then if you wanted to be, for example, an educational psychologist, you might do an educational psychology course. You might want to go into teaching, in which case you'd need a teaching qualification. You might want to go into clinical psychology, in which case you'd need to do further work. That's working with people with mental health, for example. Having said all of that, there's virtually no career that psychology doesn't really help with. It's all about people and understanding people, and most jobs involve working with people. So we get students on the psychology course who go on and do all sorts of things when they leave here, almost any degree you can think of, because it counts as a science at A-level. It won't stop you going on and doing anything that requires a science A-level as well. So we do have, for example, students who go on to study medicine who have done psychology as one of their sciences. So it does count as a science for medicine. But really it will help you with any degree that you're interested in doing or any career that involves working with people in any way. So obvious things would be things like social work, for example. But that's also true of the other social sciences, as I'm sure Philippa will say.
Hi, so there's lots of different options, like Kate just said. Similarly with criminology and sociology, is they're all about kind of understanding society and understanding people. So this leads us to lots of different options. For example, social work in different charities, because we explore kind of how our institutions in society work and what we could do to improve these. We look at what's working and what's not in our society, how can we help different social groups. All of this feeds into people having that kind of interest in social work and charities. With criminology directly, it obviously has strong links to the criminal justice system. We've had lots of students that go on to join the police, and that was their main aim in doing criminology with that in mind. But then also just kind of all aspects of the criminal justice system. As I said, we focus a lot on policy. So a lot of people have wanted to enter into the civil service or be kind of involved in policy making or perhaps research. But as well, a lot of people might want to be in the kind of prison service, a prison officer. I spoke to someone last year who wanted to be a prison teacher. So this was something that they were doing because they wanted to do a teaching degree, and they thought that would ease them quite nicely into working into that field, and also probation officers and things like that. Like Kate said, with psychology, it kind of feeds into kind of all subjects. These are written subjects where you develop your written skills, the same with law. So it really does feed into, if you were going to do anything at university, they are really useful skills that we learn over the next 2 years that you can transfer to any degree if you did choose to do a degree. Or if you chose to go in another path, you do learn very valuable skills that I think are very transferable to anything that you might choose to do in the future. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Okay, so just a little bit about enrichment. So obviously we like to apply our learning outside of the classroom as well. In criminology, we've taken trips to, with some brilliant visits to the magistrates' courts in Brighton and Lewes Crown Court. Really, really interesting for students to actually see that legal process happening. Of course, because justice is a public thing, so it's everyone's. You can go and see justice happen. So that's been some fantastic trips there. We've also had people come in from Prevent to talk about fundamentalism and extremism, which was again really useful for criminology, but that was actually a sociology speaker. Just to, again, another example of how people's beliefs affect society. We've had an expert witness come in who's like a cell site analyst working on cases to locate phones in certain places in crimes, really interesting. And we've had the police came in, talked, did a session on hate crime as well. And then in psychology, there's trips to the Bethlehem Hospital, which obviously, well, it's now a museum, and it's kind of giving you the history of how people with psychiatric illness were treated. And there's revision conferences and the chance to meet our past students. In fact, it's not just in psychology, and lots of students obviously keep in touch, and we like to get them in to tell our students what it's like to study our subjects after A-level. So there's lots of enrichment that we can offer. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so a couple of questions that we often get asked, and I want to particularly talk about the second one. So if I want to go on and do a law degree, should I do A-level law? We get asked that quite a lot. And the answer is it's not compulsory. So no law degree requires A-level law to get onto it. However, the reality is way more than half of students on each law degree have got A-level law. It's not a benefit, but neither is it a hindrance. Every university accepts it, right up to Oxford and Cambridge. But it tells you whether you like law. At the moment for you, it's an idea. You've heard bits and pieces about law, but it's something that tells you whether you have an aptitude for it, whether it's what you think it's going to be. And it's a really good taste. It's a good introduction to the subject. So our students who come back who've done the first year of their law degree say that they had a real head start over students who'd never done law before, just in knowing how law works and knowing how to approach the subject. So I think, yeah, it's something that's absolutely not compulsory, but then it isn't compulsory to do a law degree to go on and be a lawyer. There's all sorts of routes after other degrees as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay,
a couple of question we often get asked is, what's the difference between sociology and psychology? Hopefully you've kind of got a flavour for this idea that sociology is about studying society, about groups of people, like we look at social class and gender and ethnicity. So we're really looking at the societal and group aspect of society, whereas psychology is more about the mind and thinking. And as Kate was saying, much more scientific based. And I think, as we find out more and more about the brain and how it, and our mind, then obviously it becomes increasingly scientific. So they both work really well together, but they are distinctly different. And then I was just thinking, just maybe also the difference between sociology and criminology, kind of a key thing there. I think Laura alluded to one of the main differences is the way they're assessed. Criminology really is, very much half of it assessed through this controlled assessment, which is an 8-hour controlled assessment that students undertake at Christmas. Very intensive 8-hour controlled assessment and one exam, whereas sociology has those, is that traditional A-level style. So sociology, obviously we study crime, but as only one part of our subject, whereas criminology, obviously you've really got to have that of real interest in crime, and we look at it in that detail, and every aspect of it is why people do it and how it's treated in the criminal justice system. So they are really distinctly different. So hopefully that answers any questions surrounding that. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so there is a couple of questions here that have already come up in the chat. Can I do sociology, psychology and criminology without too much overlap? Yes. Lots and lots of our students do both, and actually applied law is quite often taken alongside criminology. What we find is that there's quite a lot of, that students enjoy the overlap, because often we're talking about the same ideas, but from very different perspectives. I'm really aware that we haven't got much time, so I'm going to just try and whiz through these. Is there a lot of maths? So maths on A-level psychology is a substantial part of it. It takes up 10% of the course. So you will do in your exam, 10% of your exam will be assessing maths skills, but it's pretty much no harder than what you're doing at GCSE. So you do need a grade 4 to do maths, but you do need to be comfortable with manipulating data, and you do need to be able to do that under exam conditions. So that's something to think about. The other big one is about the difference between A-level and BTEC. I've talked already about content, but in terms of how they're structured, the main difference is assessment. As Tim was talking about earlier, in the BTEC, you get coursework, which isn't in the A-level. The A-level is a linear A-level with 3 exams at the end of 2 years, whereas the BTEC has slightly more coursework in the first year than the second year, but it averages out at 40% over the whole course. So you do coursework, but you do slightly more in the first year than you do in the second year. So really, that's the main thing to consider, is the type of assessment model that they use. There's a difference between them. I think there are other questions that we'll try and deal with just towards the end now. So I'm going to leave that for now.
Okay, so if we could finish off with some of these questions. So, Kate, I think, is there, so sociology and psychology, would you cover these? In fact, I'll answer this one, in health and social care. As an element of both, yes, there's health and social care units that cover elements of psychology, and there are health and social care units that cover elements of sociology. It's not quite the same as studying them at full A level. So there are students who do the single-sized health and social care course alongside both of those A levels. So they go together in a complementary way. If you did health and social care alongside those A levels, there wouldn't be too much overlap. Exam boards, perhaps we could all answer on that one. So A-level law is OCR. Kate, for psychology?
Psychology is AQA for A-level and Pearson for BTEC.
Sociology is AQA and criminology is WEGEC, which is the Welsh exam board.
Worth saying that that WEGEC and BTEC are different providers of similar kinds of course. So there's no different status or different value of the courses. They're all worth 1 A level. They're all 2-year courses. So all the courses we're talking about in this whole presentation are the same size in terms of being worth 1 A level. There's a question just come in. Do you do 3 courses? Yes. So if you have the entrance requirements for a level 3 course, now this applies to both Haywards Heath and to Worthing, and you'll have to look on the website for the specific entrance requirements for each course. Then the requirement is that you study 3 courses to be a full-time student. It's an interesting question here. Will sociology help me to get into advertising and marketing careers? Philippa.
Will it help you get into advertising? Oh, I'm not sure. I'm wondering whether psychology might be better, talking about like the psychology of consumer behavior. I think it would help if you wanted to get onto a marketing degree, for example, because of the skills that we would learn, and you might understand, I guess, about the social characteristics of different people and how, you know, you might get some understanding of how you might reach those or have an understanding of those social groups. I don't think we don't do anything that's particularly about marketing. I would suggest maybe a media route might be better. Hope that's okay.
That sounds great. There's a question, what's the law of contract about? So contracts are what we make every day. Last time you bought a coffee in Starbucks or a can of Coke down the corner shop, you were making a contract. Now that's a contract, but also if you're chartering a ship for $100,000 a day, that's a contract. So basically it's about agreements. What happens when agreements go wrong? How do we make, what are the requirements to make a binding agreement? And the same principles apply to all contracts, whether it's the big shipping contract or whether it's a coffee down the road. So it's a large area. A lot of commercial law is based on contract law. So it's a really good basis for a city type career, but it's also very interesting. There's a lot of logic in contract law. Would sociology or psychology be better if I wanted to go into teaching?
I'll answer that one. I don't think it would make a massive amount of difference. Neither of them are national curriculum subjects for A levels, so you would need to have a national curriculum subject as well. It depends what you wanted to go into teaching. Psychology, we certainly do quite a lot of stuff on how children learn that can be really useful, but I think there's a lot that's really useful from sociology as well. I don't know, Philippa, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. You know, sociology and psychology, you can obviously go into teaching those, like myself and Kate have, but lots of students, I would say, go into teaching from social science courses. You know, you have a really good understanding of education from the education topic in sociology, and really understanding some of the pitfalls that schools might fall into. So I think it could be really useful if you wanted to go into primary teaching or you know, a kind of higher level teaching as well.
Thank you. There's a few questions, a few practical questions. So can you change the options already chosen? Yes, you'll be offered a curriculum guidance meeting. So if you've got your application into either college, Haywards Heath or Worthing, you'll be offered an interview, and at that point the subjects you've already chosen would be a basis for the interview, but you can change them, and even later in the year you can say, oh no, these were my original choices, but I've thought about them again and I've changed my mind. And so really nothing's absolutely fixed, although we like you to think about them very seriously and make an informed choice. Nothing's fixed until you sign up in September of next year, really. Entrance requirements, got a few questions about entrance requirements. Now, I don't want to list them all here now. The entrance requirements are all listed on the websites for both colleges. There'll be the same entrance requirements right away across Chichester College Group. And it's really important to have a look and see exactly what the requirement is. So I've had a question to say, do you need your grade 4 in maths? Some courses here you do, some not. So do check out and look at exactly what each course requires. There's a question also about BTECs and A-levels and their equivalents. They are the same. So a BTEC is worth the same as an A-level, and the BTEC distinction star is worth the same number of UCAS points as an A-star. Now, universities are interested in someone's overall academic potential. And I think the only time I've had a problem with somebody on BTEC law is when they wanted to go on to a physics degree. And the university wasn't very keen on looking at law because it didn't really give many transferable skills to physics. But beyond that, I know a very competitive university up the road, Sussex, wants AAB for entrance to their law degree, and they're very happy with BTECs alongside A-levels. There's a question about law, the law of tort. So the law of tort is a generic term for civil cases where you're suing someone, but it's not based on contract. I'll give you an example, the law of negligence. So if you've been knocked over by a car and you're suing the driver in negligence, that's an example of the law of tort. So it's where you're suing someone basically for causing you some harm, but it's not a criminal case. It's not the state trying to punish you. It's just you're looking for compensation or to make someone stop doing something. If your neighbor is making too much noise, you might sue them in nuisance to make them stop. I think we've talked about the job in teaching. Okay, I think we've also run out of time now. So I think any of the Q&As will be finished off. They'll be, they will go on the college website later on. I'd like to thank everyone very much for coming along and listening to us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you at future events at both colleges. Thank you very much.